Story with Molly White. I am so glad that you joined us again today. And I just want to give a shout out to our show sponsor that helps make all of this possible. And that's Dr. Stephen Hotze with the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. And without his support, we wouldn't be able to do this show and have a great producer to help us get this show on, out there on the internet and all the streaming sites. So we just want to thank Hotze Health and Wellness Center for their sponsorship. And, if you're interested in sponsoring this show, we feel it's important. We feel that, standing on Revelation 12:11, that we overcome him, the enemy, Satan, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimonies. And our testimonies are so important to go out there that will save lives, that will lead the lost to Christ, that will heal the brokenhearted and educate those who just don't know about the trauma of abortion. So if you're interested in partnering with us as a sponsor, boy, just send us an email. We would be happy to have you. And if you would just like to donate to the show, that would be so awesome that we could use those funds to help keep the show going. So just don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in sponsoring. And please be sure and like and share this show with everyone that you know and all your social media sites so that our testimonies can get out there broad and wide. And we do look for your feedback as well, because feedback is so important. So feel free to comment on the shows and let us know, how they mean, what they mean to you and what you get out of it. So without any more of the housekeeping, I want to introduce my awesome co-host, Mary Browning. Mary, come on in and say hi to everyone.
Hello, 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 Molly. Thank you for having me again today. As usual, we do want to put a little warning out there. Today, there will be a testimony about an experience of abortion. So if you have children that are listening to this with you, you may want to make some adjustments in how you listen. And also, if you're listening today and you find yourself with an emotional reaction that surprises you or is a little beyond what you had expected, that could be an invitation for you to get more healing. You can find healing resources at operationoutcry.org, and you can call a helpline. There it is, H3 helpline. And either one of those will help you find resources. And today our guest is going to also mention a healing ministry that she has.
Awesome.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Mary. And yes, we have a wonderful guest, Adriana Camp, which you have met, Mary.
Yes.
And she lives there in the same state as you do. So I'd like for you to introduce her.
Okay. Well, Adriana is a speaker. She also has her own ministry, and she's originally from Los Angeles, California. She moved to Missouri, my state, when when her husband was retiring from the military. So she's been married for 33 years. She is going to tell us some about her story, and then we're also going to ask her about her ministry. She's a licensed minister too with United Pentecostal Church. I might mention that as well.
Awesome.
So, Adriana, would you like to join us?
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Adriana.
Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak about my ministry. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And when Mary was mentioning that you're a licensed minister with the Pentecostal Church International or something like that, to me, it goes to show that abortion is not an unforgivable sin, and that God can still use us in ministry and use us for His kingdom. Even after we've had an abortion. And for me, when I was still wounded, I was thinking that abortion was an unforgivable sin. And it's not. So why don't you tell us a little bit, I guess, about where it all started with you in this pro-life movement?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I know how God works, and He's so good at putting things together. But it's interesting that you mentioned about the unforgivable sin, because I was a Christian. I became a Christian soon after I got married. Probably I've been a Christian for 30 years. And every day until I went through abortion recovery, every single time I prayed, I would pray for God to forgive me for having had an abortion. I
Wow.
knew He had forgiven me for all the other things I'd done, but I knew that that one was different. I thought it was in a different category. No way God could forgive me for having killed my own baby.
Wow, that's
So,
powerful.
yes,
And it's common. It's very common, for
yes,
women to feel that way,
yes, yes.
even when they're not believers. I
Right.
wasn't a believer, and I still felt that this was something that God couldn't forgive. Mhm.
Mhm. Yes. And so I have a very brief story about my abortion. I don't remember that much, which I think it's a kind of a blessing in disguise. But I was 18, dysfunctional home. My mom was single, doing her own thing. I had a little brother that was 8. Uh, Not really, no one really forced me. My boyfriend was 17. He didn't force me. He just said, I'll do whatever you want to do. And then I just said, yes, I need to have an abortion. There's no way. Now, the little background before that is that I had had a really close family member that I had known that had an abortion. So to me, that was kind of a precedent, this is what you do.
Mm,
So anyway, the date was set. We went. I don't remember clearly. I really don't remember where it was, where I went, exact date. I know it was July of 86, but I don't remember the date, the place. I remember a very just vague picture of me walking in this room, being led gently. I don't have like a horror story about that, but I was told to lie on the bed, and as laid back, I had a man come behind me and put a mask on my face. And then I don't remember anything after that. I fell asleep, and then I remember waking up in my room, in my bed. And that's the next thing I remember. It's like a slide. I just remember that. And then just crying, and just feeling so much guilt. And so I was crying, and I thought, if I have another baby, if I ask God to give me a baby, then I could show him I could be a good mom, and I can make up for this. And I didn't know then that that is post-abortion symptoms, who want to, make up for the loss. And so God was super, super good, gracious to me. And the same baby's dad, we got pregnant, and our son was born December 7th of 87.
mm,
So he is a blessing to us, to me. And anyway, my mom forced us to get married because we were teenagers, and she didn't want us to be single. She didn't want me to be a single mom like she was. And there was a lot of abuse, a lot of verbal, physical, all of it. And so we soon divorced. My son was 2.5, and I married my husband, whom I'm married to today. And he adopted my son, and it was just a beautiful story. Then I had another child in 1991. Then I had another one in 98. My husband's in the military. We're traveling. We are, in we lived in Germany for 6 years. We lived in Washington State. I mean, we're just having, but every time I prayed, I would ask God to forgive me for having an
wow,
abortion. Because
wow.
I didn't talk about it. I didn't, whatever. But when I prayed, I knew it was a God, God and me, we were there. And I just thought, God, I know that you can't forgive that because it's horrible. So in the
It
winter
was
of
kind of like a burden that you carried all
yes,
this time,
oh yes,
and
all the time.
something that you couldn't let go of. I mean, it just stayed with you, and it does stay with us until we have reconciliation. But can I ask you a question? Can we go back a little bit, because this is something very common too, and I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit more. Do you think that your marital troubles with your first marriage had to do with unresolved guilt and grief over your abortion, your prior abortion? Do you think
Um,
that played anything into that?
we were both dysfunctional in different ways. He did have parents, he did have a dad and a mom, and all that. But he had dysfunction in his life. I had a lot of dysfunction. But I do think that before we had the abortion, our relationship was different. It was not this angry, abusive. It was not. It was after the abuse.
Mhm.
So I do think, absolutely yes,
Yeah.
I do think that.
And it's very common. It's very common for those relationships to dissolve or have a lot of problems associated with that unresolved guilt, that unresolved
Mhm.
grief, that loss that you don't communicate about, you don't heal from. And so somehow it comes out in relationship dysfunctions,
That's
and it
right.
could lead to divorce. It could lead to even not marrying the father of the child, or, in that kind of relationship. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, and let our viewers know that that's something that's very common. And I do
Yes.
know, and you've probably met women in your counseling that even married abusive men after that abortion. They might not have been the father of that child, but they feel like they don't deserve a good husband,
That's right.
or
Yes.
they deserve to be punished. And so, we want to make sure that we don't do that, and to encourage, women not to do that. God's not going to punish you, so don't marry someone who would, not treat you right, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
Molly and Adriana, I just thank you, Molly, for underscoring that. I just wanted to mention, because as I'm understanding, you explained that to Molly, you were not aware at the time that you were married to your baby's father. You were not aware that that
No.
was any piece of the behavioral. No,
No.
Yeah, no, not at the time.
no,
Yeah,
not at
not at
the
the time.
time.
I
Mhm.
Mhm.
mean, aside from just being 19 years old,
Right.
uh, I, it was, there's so much ignorance. You don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
there's so much ignorance, so I married my husband now, and like I said, life was good, and my husband retired from the military in 2010, and we moved here to Missouri, and I was still, there was still so much of that background, because like you mentioned, Molly, it was always like a burden on me, like, I know I did that, and I know, and so my husband is a license, well, actually, he was a licensed minister, and his career kind of took a switch, so he's traveling a lot now, so he gave up his license for now, but he was a licensed minister, and I was a homeschool mom, retired military, so we had, like, from the outside, everything was just so great for us. Our children are living for God, our children are in ministry, and I would lie in my bed at night, and I would think, if anybody knew what I did,
Mhm.
it would be like all it would be uh destroyed, like my whole who I
Yeah.
am,
Everything would come crashing down. Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
I just thought my whole identity would be just lost. And so I remember that, thinking that all the time. But then a thought started coming to my mind. Should I tell my boys about my abortion? And so, this is how God started. I could
Ah.
pivot back to where God started to deal with me on
Mhm.
actually telling someone,
Mm.
because when my daughter was 18, I had told her I had had an abortion, just because I didn't want her to make bad choices like I had. But my sons didn't know, and so I had a son that I had two sons that at this time, were 25 and 15 or whatever. So I was just like, should I tell them? And so I got an email from a lady that's just, very, very, she's an advocate for women and all that. And she sent me an email. Babe Alien is her name. And she sent me an email on a January 29th, and it was inviting me to March for Life in Jeff City. And the second I saw that email, I thought, I am not going to this. This is they would not want me there. They would not, these are people, these are
Mhm.
pro-life people, and they would probably stone me if they knew what I had done.
Mhm.
And so February 2nd was the day for the march, and that morning I woke up. It almost as if I had no say in my own actions. It was like the Lord is grabbing me from the back of my pajamas and saying, get dressed, and I'm like, so I get up at 7 or 6, whatever. I got up really early. And my husband's like, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going." And I was angry, I'm just like, "I'm going to march," And he's like, "Okay, okay." So, and I didn't invite him. I didn't ask him to go with me. And it was just almost like it was like planned this way because I live about 40 minutes from there, 40 minutes drive. And when I got in my car, I had started driving out, and then I started to scream at God
Mm,
for
mm,
the first time in the 30 years that I had the abortion. I was so angry with God
mm,
because I said, "You could have done something.
mm,
You could have stopped me, and you didn't.
mm,
You are all powerful. You are all knowing, and you knew the pain it was going to be in my life." And I was just so angry for all the years that I had, dealing with the shame and the anguish of my choice, and the worry that people found out and that people were going to hate me. And so I'm just angry at God because, in my mind, he's all powerful and can do all the things. So I drive all the way there doing this, crying, repenting for being mad, just all the feelings, being sorry for myself and being angry at myself and saying, "Well, you did it. You're the one that chose to do this.
mm.
So I'm having all these crazy feelings and emotions. And then I get there, and the march was going to be, on the, at the Capitol, but I parked in the bottom parking lot, and it was February 2nd. It's like cold, but
Mm.
I'm just like in a cold sweat, and I'm just like not really wanting a coat. And I'm just like walking with my little vest, and I'm just walking up the hill. And I got there, and there's just all these people, there are all these people. And there was a woman on the pulpit, and she's like, "Abortion is evil," and she's saying it's like, uh Molech sacrifices and things. She's saying all this stuff, and there's a poor innocent man next to me, and there's a table with signs, and he says, "Ma'am, would you like to hold a sign?" And I'm like, "No," you know, because I thought, if I'm holding this sign, if I'm holding that sign, I'm just, it's almost like I'm saying like spotlight. So I'm like, they'll know if I hold the sign, they'll know. But there's, never mind that there's 100 people holding the signs.
Yes. Yeah.
But so I'm standing there, and then this person who I didn't catch her name at first because I wasn't paying attention to her name because I wasn't gonna do anything. I was just gonna leave there as soon as I could. Gets up on the platform and says, "Hi, my name is," and then she says, "I had an abortion when I was 17." And I'm thinking, I am waiting for the reaction of the people.
Mm,
I never in my life before heard someone say, "I had an abortion." So I was just waiting. And as soon as she said that, the Lord said, "That's going to be you."
wow.
And I broke into a colder sweat, and I'm like, "No, that's not going to be me. And so I was just like, "God, you were wrong. You just don't even know." And so I finished talking. And then before she finished talking, she said, "If you had an abortion and you regret it, there is, forgiveness, and there is recovery, whatever." And then God said, "That's your person." And I'm like, "What is her name?" I didn't catch her name. So I go around the march, and I meet Susan Klein, who was there at that rally I was just at. And I
And we'll just,
see,
Susan is the head right now of Missouri Right to Life. So we'll
Okay.
just mention that. Yes.
Okay.
yes, yes. So Susan is just a great advocate for this whole thing. And so I see her, but I don't know who she is. I said, "Excuse me," I said, do you know who that lady that was in the platform that talked about her abortion?" I said, "I need to talk to her." And I'm talking to Susan Klein, but I don't know what Susan Klein, right? And so she looks at me and she says, I don't know. I don't. And then I said, "I had an abortion when I was 18." And that was the first person I said it to. That was like, I was just so ready. I was just so ready. I was full. And I said it to her, and she was like, like, "Okay," and She didn't know. Anyway, very long story short, I'm walking through, the whole march is over. I hear these horrible testimonies from these women that have, whole thing. And I am walking through the gym in this little, in the Catholic church, they had all this vendors and all that in the gym. And so I'm walking around looking for Nancy. And I am literally like maybe 5 feet from the door. And I said, I'm leaving. I'm never coming back. I am done. Woo, thank you, Jesus. That wasn't you. That was your voice. That was the lady I needed to talk to. I looked for her. I couldn't find her. I'm done. And I'm walking towards that door. And I hear this woman, hey, screaming. And I turn around, and I was by some shirts, and I thought she was a lady of selling the shirts. And I said, "Are you selling the shirts?" And she says, "No, I heard that the lady with the bun was looking for me." So she saw me on the other side from the other side.
Wow.
And I had said this to Mary. Had I not worn my hair like this, she wouldn't have found me.
Wow.
Because
That's right.
And so she said, I heard the lady with the bun was looking for me. My name is Nancy Hall. I'm the one that spoke.
Wow.
And I'm like, no.
Wow. It was God. God was all over it.
Oh, yes. And then I'm just trying to hasten here because I want to get to this part where so she offers me the recovery, and I said, no. I'm thinking I'm a Christian. I don't need this recovery. This is stupid. I'm a practical person. I just want practical things. This doesn't seem practical. What am I going to do there? So she said, you need, the recovery. So I just need to know if I need to tell my sons that I had an abortion. And I was hoping she would say, leave it in the past. It's gone. It's in the past. Leave it in the past, But no, she said, no, go through the recovery. And I'm like, oh, Lord. Okay, so we set up the recovery for 20 days from that day. So this is February 2nd, February 22nd. I'm supposed to go to her house and meet up and stay there for the whole 3-day weekend. And
this was at Rachel's Vineyard?
No, this was just surrendering the secret.
Surrendering the secret. Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's what she does. But she does it in a 3-day, retreat. Mm-hmm. So she said, in the days between now and we meet, God's going to show you some stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah. So I go home. She sends me the book. We do whatever. And I'm reading the book. She tells me to read 3 chapters. So I'm in my office, reading my book. And I still had my son at home, my youngest one, and I'm reading the book, and I'm doing the questions, and he comes in, and I'm like, hiding the book. The whole thing was just so crazy to me because I'm like, I can't believe this, So the day of this happens, this. I don't want to get ahead, but I do want to say this. It's so important. I was doing dishes, and I wanted to name my son the one I had after. I wanted to name him Eric, and I never could. It was just like name him something else or whatever. So I was looking out the window because my son used to live across the street, my oldest one, and I thought I wonder why I never was able to name him Eric. And it was just like it was God's voice. Like, I mean, I know it was God's voice, but it was just like I heard audibly. God said, "You already have an Eric."
Wow.
And I fell on the floor and I just cried. I don't know how long. So when I got to the retreat, I told this to Nancy, and she says, I knew the Lord was going to reveal things to you.
Wow.
The recovery, I was able to tell my sons. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Hardest thing I've ever done in my life, telling my sons about my abortion. They were both very graceful, very forgiving. My oldest son, he's a licensed minister. He's a pastor. He's very wise. And he said, Mom, I only hate that you thought we would ever hate you. We would never hate you. And so it started a real healing between, us. But I told him, I said, my story is going to be public. And so now just but your friends are going to know your mom had an abortion, So anyway, long story short, I met Georgette Forney. I met, I just started kind of connecting people. And I went to the March for Life in Washington, D.C., which was the very first time I would give my testimony in public like that,
And when was that, Adriana?
That was January 2020. So that was
my first March was um, January of 2002. Yeah,
Oh,
2002. Yeah, yeah. And then
okay.
we spoke with Silent No More many times there in front of the Supreme Court. So we've shared our stories there many times, and that's really powerful. So that's really cool. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So I was there. I was there. It was just nerve wracking. I was just, I had no idea what I was doing, but the Lord brought back to me. Remember when I said that when that Nancy was speaking, the Lord said that's going to be you, and
Yes,
then
and there you are.
not even an exact year later, there I
Wow.
am in
Wow.
not in front of hundreds of people, but in front of thousands of people,
Yes.
and somebody records makes a video of my speech or my testimony, and then they put it on Facebook, and every single person that I ever ministered to, every single the people that I knew in my organization, people, I mean, I had a guy immediately message me to do a podcast, from our religious organization. He said, your video is going viral. He says, have you looked at it? It was the first day. People had put it out that day, and that day it was shared hundreds of times, and it was viewed
Wow.
thousands of times.
Wow.
People were sharing that. And so he's like, would you like to, be in my podcast? And so I was the very first person in the in this organization that had ever come out with
Mhm. Mhm.
a story like
Yeah.
this. So people could not believe it. It was like, I mean, people call me Sister Camp, and they're like, Sister Camp had an abortion. Like, that is so amazing that she's coming out. So I started to be bombarded. I'm not kidding you. The very first month, I thought, does everybody I know had an abortion?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
Yeah.
friends that I'd known for years,
Yeah.
friends that I had known for years started messaging me and telling me I had an abortion pill. Messenger.
Adriana, if I could just interrupt just for a minute, I just want to the connecting the dots here seems so strong. You sort of unbeknownst to you were going to hear an abortion story when you went to the March for Life in Missouri in that February day, and you
Yes.
heard that story, and you then were compelled to tell someone on that day,
Hmm.
and then you told, just a few years later, you told your own story, or 1 year later you told your own story, and it went viral, and then all these other women started coming forward, maybe men too.
Yes.
So I just wanted to underscore that for our listeners and
Yes.
viewers,
And it,
that the
yeah.
importance
Yeah.
of the fruit that comes when you actually are transparent and vulnerable, because there is a vulnerability to it, and you're sort of speaking to that issue. But
Yes.
and so it takes an element of courage, but there's fruit that comes from that. So
Definitely.
Yes. And,
Yes.
and I wanted, and I agree with that, Mary. And I wanted to say too, it's like, I want to say open up a can of worms, but it's like the earth is waiting for someone to share,
mhm,
someone to speak it out loud so that I
mhm,
can do that too. So I can have
mhm,
that release, so I can have that freedom.
mhm.
It's kind of what I was sensing and feeling when you were sharing about the response you got. And that's the response I think we all get when we, do what God's called us to do, and overcome our fear of speaking. And because of the, like you said, Mary, the fruit that comes from it, when we can overcome that fear, when we can speak it and share it, then not only does it help us heal and recover, but it brings those along that have been silent for so many years too. Because like you said, you were shocked, and I was shocked too the first time I heard a testimony, similar, different situation, but similar. It's like I'd never heard another woman speak that out loud before. And then
And
all this grief and all of this stuff that was hidden in me, buried in me, started surfacing. And that's why Mary comes on here and gives a disclaimer. If you
mhm,
start feeling emotion, and if you're being triggered and you don't understand why, if there's been an abortion in your past, then that's what the Lord is trying to bring up and to bring you to healing, really, to speak about it and bring you to healing. So anyway, now all of a sudden this floodgate opens for you, Adriana, and you're starting to minister now to women and men who are coming forward. And I know it was probably shocking to you. Um, But then at the same time, it's like, I'm not the only one.
Right,
I'm
right.
not
And
the only one.
and the fear that I had, the shame was that, people were gonna say, here's this lady that used to, she's a minister's wife, and she is a homeschooler and a military person, and all what she does is pray and whatever. And she's such a hypocrite because she's hiding this horrible, sin, or
Mhm.
that was my mentality. But
Mhm.
in the 5 years, almost six, that I've been sharing my story, I have yet to come to that person that is ugly to me, or
Mm.
that is judging me, or that has said, you did something horrible. I mean, people are so kind.
Yeah.
People are just so merciful, and I know you
Mm.
have the people that, but for the most part, people are so kind. And I've had people come to me that act like I just had the abortion like last month,
Mm.
like people come up to me, this dear lady that I just love, she came up to me. She's a little older than me, but she came up to me, she puts her hands like this, and she says, sweetheart, I want you to know that I love you. Jesus loves you. We don't judge
Mhm.
you, and
Oh,
so that love, that you're just getting
Mhm.
from people, and it's the satanic lies that tell,
Mhm.
if you tell it, if anybody finds out,
Mhm.
you are doomed, and no one's going to like you, and you're going to be
Mhm.
destroyed. That
yeah.
is a lie
Yeah.
from Satan, because
Yeah.
that is not what happens.
It is exactly a lie of Satan, and that's what keeps so many women silent. And like
Mhm.
you said, you didn't see a negative response from the woman who heard share her testimony,
Right.
Nancy, because you were looking for people to start throwing stones. And that's how I felt when I shared mine for the first time. I thought, oh my goodness, they're going to throw stones at me. They're going to hate me. But I was compelled to tell. I needed
Mhm.
people to know how abortion hurt me, how what you made legal hurt me.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh,
and and I didn't get that response. I got the same response you did, Adriana: love and acceptance and appreciation. But I would have to say, going back to 2001, when I started getting involved and sharing story, we weren't as well accepted by the pro-life community.
Mhm.
right.
We were like, we were there, but we weren't that important. But
Mhm.
things have changed dramatically now. Now
Mhm.
the pro-life community understands the power of testimony, the
Yes.
power of how the abortion industry deceives women, exploits pregnant women, is just making a profit without helping women. And it's leading to such bondage and trauma and hurt and grief and just everything negative coming from it. Nothing positive comes from it. So I
Molly,
think they're starting to
Mo-
understand that.
I wonder if I could interject because I heard Adriana speak, and I don't think it's only women that come forward.
Right.
Adriana, have you had men come forward as well?
Yes, and that is just so interesting, because most of the time when I'm speaking anywhere I'm speaking, I say that I make a point to say, that if you are a man here in this audience that feels, guilt and shame because you forced your wife or your girlfriend to have an abortion, or if you had no choice in the matter and your wife or girlfriend said, I'm having the abortion, no matter what you say, and you feel powerless, I want to compel you to get, healing. There is healing, there's restoration. God loves you just as much, and so I have had men, I mean, and I just really want to speak to this, that men are hurting, and they're even less able to talk about it than women, because they feel like they don't have a voice,
Mhm.
and two instances happened. I was getting ready for a conference 2 years ago, and I was packing my stuff, and I always set a table out and have information, and I had this book that Pat Layton and her husband wrote for men for healing, and I felt the Lord kept telling me to pack that in my stuff, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do any recovery, I'm not going to pack it. So I kept packing, and God's like, okay, pack the book, and I'm like, fine, it's a book. Just I threw it in my bag, I forgot about it. So I speak in the morning session on Thursday. Then in the night session, I spoke on Friday. And when I was done, I was, the service was over, and I was at my pew getting my Bible to go to my table. This man, huge, tall, burly man, probably 6'3", just comes up to me with his little wife, and he says, he's crying. He's
Mhm.
crying, and he
Mm.
says, Sister Camp, I just want to thank you for what you said. I want to thank you for how you brought this out. He says, in the year that you had your abortion, he said, I lost a baby. He said, my
Mhm.
wife divorced me. She left me and she was
Mhm.
pregnant with our child. And she
Mhm.
said she wanted nothing from me. And she killed aborted my baby. He said, and I've lived with that horrible, horrible thought all
Mhm.
these years,
Wow.
and so then, and immediately I thought of the book. I thought of the
Mhm.
book that I had in my bag, and I thought, God is so interested in our healing. He's so
Mhm.
intentional, in our healing. And then just, another time there was a man, I mean, he was probably, I'm going to say late 70s, early 80s. He's in another place I spoke, and he comes up to me and another, a couple of the other women I was around, and he's sharing that he had, he paid for someone's um
Wow.
abortion, and that this person is related to him, and that he feels guilt, and that they still talk about it, and they still grieve over it, and that, it's just he has so much guilt for doing this. And so when I spoke at that place, I said the same thing. I said, if you are here with that guilt, with that shame, God loves you and he wants to help you. And so
Mhm.
I immediately gave him my card, and I told him, there's hope, you're not alone. God loves you. He wants to heal you. He wants to help, the other person too, in case they still had, connection. And so I just thought it's so important to speak to men. I just think
Yes.
It
Mm.
absolutely is. It hurts so many people. And that's a good segue into, we're about coming to the end of our show. So I
Mhm.
want you to talk a little bit about your ministry, Choose to Be Healed, and,
chosen
and,
to
and chose, chosen to be healed. And then as you talk about that, you have encouraged our listeners, to seek healing if they've had an abortion. But you might just close with, encouraging those who haven't gone through healing if they've had an abortion to do so, and how they can contact you.
Yes, so on the website, and then this website is kind of, under construction still. It's not fully, done, but I have a lot of resources, and I have worked with lots of different places, with support after abortion. I've worked with Silent No More. I've worked with H3 Helpline. I've worked with, I've gone through the Rachel's Vineyard recovery, so there's just a lot of venues, that people could access for recovery, and just that, then after that, for being involved, but H3 Helpline is a huge one, that people call, and my husband made me quit because I was involved in that, and he's like, you need to give something up, you're doing too much. So I was working on H3 Helpline, and I remember the calls, so on my website right now, my goal, and I think where God wants me right now, is I do offer the recovery sessions. I do myself offer them, but I like to offer that one-on-one. I don't like to do it on Zoom, but I know, like Mindy Lefoucher with An Even Place, she's excellent at
Mm.
doing the recovery online, virtual. So she is one of my people. So I have all of those links on my website kind of compounded in there. I have some books, some books that I suggest, reading for people that, don't know much about any of it, the different facets of it. One of them is shock waves, which is for, like how abortion affects not just you, but your family, your children, your
Mhm.
parents,
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
Mhm.
sisters and brothers, you took a family member out. So there's just so many different resources. So that is what I am doing right now. My ministry is mostly me speaking out and, educating pastors, educating people that don't know how to handle a woman that comes to them and said
Mhm.
an abortion, because a lot of people say, well, just pray about it, go to the altar, repent,
Mhm.
and those are all good things. And yes, we should do this, but I think that our mental side of our being needs that, closure, and
Mhm.
needs to have that
Healing
that
process. Yeah.
yes. And
Mhm.
so right now, my big goal is to mainly, my organization, the United Pentecostal Church, is so good about different recoveries, but we don't have an abortion recovery that is, that is worldwide, United Pentecostal Church, my goal is to have it endorsed through them, and have
Awesome.
women in
Mhm. Mhm.
just be educated and go through the recovery, you
And
know. And so my website is there for more resources and links and stuff. And then I speak out for education, or just to talk about
good.
the process and how abortion hurts women,
Good.
so.
Awesome. Well, if you are wanting Adriana to come speak at your church, at one of your functions, at your pro life event, then I'm sure they can contact you through your website. Is that correct, Adriana?
Yes, and well, my website has the email, but if you don't mind, maybe on the notes or something, maybe putting in my email and information on that.
Sure. Yeah. So if you want to share that, then we can put that on there. Our producer can put it on there. So it's Adriana at what? Your email.
So my email is chosen-to-be-healed.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You're just that chosen to be healed or
No,
your name?
I can't believe this. I have to. I just went
Adriana at chosen to be healed
Adriana,
or
chosen to be healed. Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Okay.
Awesome. And we'll put
Okay.
that on there. And Adriana, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story. I praise God that how He worked in you. I mean, it's always exciting to see how God moves in our lives, and for us to be able to share that. Take us
Yes.
from the pit of hurt to up there on a pedestal where we're sharing our
Mhm.
story and sharing God's goodness. And I just pray for you, Adriana, that the what is it? The Pentecostal what
It's
United.
United Pentecostal Church. United Pentecostal
I
Church.
pray that God will put you in a higher elevation in that, and that He would use you to bring this abortion recovery throughout the whole organization, throughout the world, wherever
Yes,
y'all are, and that He would put
Mhm.
you in that leadership position to see that that's done, because it's
yes,
so important. And it needs to be in every denomination, every
Yes.
church, everywhere. And I
yes,
think it is starting to happen that way, because I
yes,
think the church is starting to wake up, and see how
Yes.
abortion does hurt not only women, men, entire family units in our whole society. So I
yes.
pray that God will elevate you to that position that you could do that. So, uh,
So
Yes.
again, let me just say that it's Adriana at chosen-to-be-healed.com. That's my email. And
Adriana at chosentobehealed.com. And we encourage y'all to get in touch with her and invite her to come share her amazing story. And anyway, we want to thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you, Adriana, for coming on and sharing your
Mhm.
story with us. And Mary, thank you for
Thank
all
you.
your input. And we thank you for listening to More to the Story with Molly White. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Take
Thank
care.
you.
God bless. Bye bye.